What does inclusive education really mean? And what a recent trip to the dentist tells me about why it is so hard to change. Also, why can't Rosie ride the same bus as her brother? All of this and more on the video edition of the Weeklyish. Hi y'all, I'm Tim Villegas. For years, and I mean years, I had a hole in one of my molars. It's embarrassing to tell you the truth, but a few weeks ago, it started to hurt. Bad. And I couldn't ignore it anymore. Even though I desperately wanted to. I mean, I went years without it actually bothering me. Food would get stuck in my teeth, but that's what toothpicks are for, right? Wrong. Throughout the years, I made a lot of excuses. It was going to cost too much money. I don't have the time to take care of it. I didn't want the dentist to judge my lack of action as a character flaw. You name it, it went through my head. But you know what finally got me to the dentist? It was the pain that forced me to deal with my problem. And unfortunately, sometimes it takes a problem that you can't ignore to get someone to do something. This relates to inclusive education in that school districts typically aren't looking to fix problems that aren't causing them any pain. Many times, the only reason a school district is encouraged to change is because of a lawsuit, recommendations from a special education audit, or direction from the State Department of Education. Last week, we published an article on Think Inclusive about finding your school district's least restrictive environment percentage, or LRE percentage, for students with IEPs in general education for 80% or more of their day. I noted that just because districts have a high percentage of students included in general education classrooms, it doesn't mean that they are actually an inclusive school district. Placement is an important part, but only one aspect of inclusive education. Placement is just a first step. It's just a foot in the door. So what does inclusive education really mean anyway? So this video and post is not meant to be the last word on what inclusive education really is and means, but it is a conversation starter, spurred on from the last edition of the Weeklyish. Now, in the last edition, I gave you some homework. So did you do your homework? Did you ask someone to define what inclusive education meant to them? Well, even if you didn't, I'll let it slide for one more week. In their book, The Inclusive Education Checklist, I love how Villa and Thousand frame inclusive education, calling it both a vision and a practice of welcoming, valuing, empowering, and supporting diverse academic, social, emotional, language, and communication learning of all students in shared environments, an experience for the purpose of attaining the desired goals of education. Inclusion is a belief that everyone belongs regardless of need or perceived ability, and that all are valued and contributing members of the school community. Check that out. Inclusive education is both a vision and a practice. Maybe that's why it's so hard to define, because we don't all share the same vision. Now, here is how TASH, an international organization that advocates for human rights and inclusion for people with significant disabilities and support needs, defines it. All students are presumed competent, are welcomed as valued members of all general education classes and extracurricular activities in their local schools. Fully participate and learn alongside their same-age peers in general education instruction based on the general education curriculum and experience reciprocal social relationships. These are fantastic definitions, and anyone who is an inclusionist should be very familiar with them. But these definitions aren't the complete picture. Students with disabilities have to be present in general education classrooms before we can call it inclusive education. We as educators have to recognize that the existence of segregated special education classrooms is a barrier to authentic inclusion. This was a mistake that I first made when I was a special education teacher. I could look at both of these definitions of inclusive education and still see enough wiggle room to say that our school or district was inclusive. But I was missing the first step. Sure, I included some of my students in one or two general education classrooms, and I felt pretty good about that. But what was my school doing to welcome all students in the self-contained classrooms into general education to feel welcomed, and what did it actually look like? Educators, you are only one person, which means that in order for you to effect change, you need your friends, allies, co-conspirators to help. Now, here are 15 indicators from the Villa and Thousand book, Inclusive Education Checklist, that spell out what degree your school or district might be inclusive. Number 1, students with disabilities attend the home school or school of choice they would attend if they did not have a disability. 2, the length of the school day for students with disabilities is not shorter than the length of the school day for students without disabilities. 3, the first placement option discussed for each child with a disability is the general education classroom with all the necessary supports, specially designed instruction, supplementary aids, and related services. 4, students with disabilities are educated alongside their same-age peers without disabilities. 5, all students, regardless of ability, have access to the same curricular and extracurricular activities. 6, respectful language, whether person first or identity first, is used when describing students. 7, school staff presumes competence for all students, especially those who are non-speaking. 8, general education teachers are provided with and use specific information regarding students' strengths and needs in order to support each student reaching their potential. 9, lack of adequate personnel or resources is not used to argue that a student with a disability should be removed from general education. 10, the need for modifications to the general education curriculum is not used to argue that a student with a disability should be removed from general education. 11, all student subgroups, like English learners, students with disabilities, children living in poverty, are making progress on grade level standards. 12, students are supported to learn skills leading to greater independence, self-determination, and self-advocacy. 13, across all federal special education eligibility categories and racial ethnic groups, 90% or more of students with disabilities are educated within general education classes for 80% or more of their day. 14, across all 13 federal special education eligibility categories and racial ethnic groups, 80% or more of students with disabilities receive their instruction in core academic curriculum in general education classrooms rather than in alternative special education content classes. And 15, the percentage of students in the school eligible for special education services mirrors and does not exceed the national, state, or regional percentage. Wow, I know, right? How many indicators of inclusive education is your school district knocking out of the park? And just a quick note about the above referenced list. As great as this is, Costin and McLeod's book, called The Paraprofessional's Handbook for Effective Support in Inclusive Classrooms, offer other indicators, like scheduling in natural proportions, meaning that no one classroom has an overrepresentation of students with disabilities. Special and general education teachers co-plan, co-teach, and co-assess with each other. Educators use community building in their classrooms to foster belonging. A universal design for learning framework is used to plan for all students. Differentiation is utilized for all students. Groupings within classes are heterogeneous. Engaging instruction happens for all students. Technology is used to support independence, communication, and socialization. Now, you may be saying, this is great, Tim, but what can I do about it? So let me ask you, did you do your homework? Y'all, school is starting up for many students and families this week. There is a lot on our minds as we try to navigate our safety and sanity for this school year. All you need to do to get started is ask some questions. And here's how that might look. You might want to ask a friend or colleague, have you heard of this newsletter called the Weeklyish? No, I've never heard of it. Oh, it's great. You see, this guy, Tim Villegas, who used to be a special education teacher, writes about inclusion. And this week, he wrote about the indicators that make a school inclusive. Now, what comes to your mind when I say inclusive education? Actually, I've never considered it. Or, aren't we already an inclusive school? We have an inclusion class at every grade level. Have you heard about this concept called natural proportions? What if we all did that this week? Seriously, ask some questions and get back to me on how it went. All right, in case you missed it, make sure you check out our latest post on thinkinclusive.us, the official blog of MCIE. Now, in the news, we have an update on Rosie, who was featured in our Question of the Weeklyish post last week. Last week, we told you about Rosie, a kindergartner, who wanted to ride the same bus to school as her brother, but her school district said, nope, you have a disability, you have to ride the segregated special education bus to school. Well, the family got word from the district just recently, and were told that they were granting their request for Rosie to ride the same bus as her brother and neighbors. Here's an update from the family's advocate, Sarah Jo Soltivari.
Hi everyone, my name is Sarah Jo Soltivari, and I'm one of Rosie's non-attorney advocates from Team Inclusion LLC. I'm here today with Rosie's parents' permission to share with you more of Rosie's story. First, we would like to thank you again for the outcry of support we have received and hope that you continue to follow us as we fight for full inclusion and equity for all students. As many of you know, Rosie will be entering kindergarten this fall, fully included in her general education classroom in her neighborhood school. A right for all students with disabilities under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA. Throughout our due process case, it was of paramount importance to Rosie's mom and dad that this was not just about Rosie, but for all students who are being segregated due to their disability. As Rosie's parents stated in a previous video, our work is not done. We vehemently disagree with the assertion that Old Bridge Public Schools does not segregate students with disabilities away from their non-disabled peers in their transportation practices, specifically due to the written communication we received from the assistant superintendent that, quote, the district does not place aids on large buses, end quote. We call on Old Bridge Public Schools Board of Education to have an independent audit completed on their transportation practices, specifically as it relates to students with disabilities accessing standard buses. Stay tuned to our page for more ways you can help us end segregation for students with disabilities. Thank you.
That's it for the video edition of the Weeklyish. I'm Tim Villegas. For more, subscribe to the Weeklyish, the newsletter for inclusionists at weeklyish.substack.com. Want even more? Visit thinkinclusive.us, the official blog of MCIE. Please comment, like, and or subscribe. Thanks for your time and attention, and remember, inclusion always works.